Spy Family is undoubtedly one of the best anime of the new generation. It's got great humor, characters, story. There's hardly anything that could ruin it. Except maybe one thing. Yuri's attachment to Yor is very, intense to say the least. At the most, well, a lot of people have interpreted it that Yuri is actually in love with Yor, and to be honest, any outsider who is watching a scene out of context definitely would just jump to that conclusion. I mean, just look at this locker he has at work, like, this is a little much. I'm an only child, but I'm pretty sure maybe 1 or 2 photos in a group setting would be acceptable, but definitely not like this. But is Yuri actually incestually in love with Yor? And beyond that, is it just for comedic purposes, or is there some kind of deeper meaning when we're looking into why Yuri behaves this way? To find our answer, we're gonna have to start with looking at what kind of relationship Yor and Yuri share with each other. The siblings' parents died when they were both very young, so Yor had to pick up the pieces and acted as a caretaker for Yuri in many aspects such as cooking, earning income, and taking care of Yuri while he's sick. Now, if you remember, one of the first scenes that Yuri flashbacks to is him telling Yor that he'll marry her one day, which is our first incriminating piece of evidence for a lot of people. But let's back up and try to break this part down, because I think a lot of people are being a little too harsh on Yuri here, believe it or not. So there's really just one thing going on here, and I think it's just that Yuri's just a kid. Like, if you grew up with your parents, like me for example, I gave my mom flowers or chocolate or whatever for Valentine's Day, which is, you know, usually a holiday for lovers, but that doesn't mean I liked my mom in that way, obviously. Or to put it even simpler, when kids first find out about the concept of love and marriage, they just kind of assume, oh yeah, I love my parent, I'll marry them when I'm older, obviously. Kids haven't really figured out about the different types of love, you know what I mean? So I would personally give Yuri a pass just because of his age, and when Yor says she'll just have to wait for Yuri to be older, I don't really think Yor meant anything by that either, honestly. She's just a big sister that's been forced to take on the role of a mother, so she kind of just got put on the spot and decided to say something cute to make young Yuri happy at the moment. However, there is one element that I think is undeniable about Yuri, is that his obsession with his sister, even when he's older, is quite peculiar. And I think that guarantees at the minimum that Yuri has a very cis-con relationship with Yor. Now, an important thing to note about cis-con is that this is the broad term. So, if we're getting technical, for example, all incest relationships are cis-cons, but not all cis-cons are incestual relationships. It's like the square versus rectangle comparison. But let's back up a little bit. So, what is a complex exactly? Based on what I could gather, a complex is a series of underlying emotions, wishes, trauma, etc. that have an underlying theme such as one's social status or power, for example, that groups together subconsciously. According to Dr. Dewey in his version of Psychology: An Introduction, an example would be if someone were to have their leg amputated as a child, even if they overcame the physical handicap, they'd still have feelings and emotions surrounded by this event such as inferiority or bitterness. According to the founder of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, if these feelings are left unresolved, they'll continue to fester and develop into unconscious maladaptive influence on their thoughts and affect their psychological development. So, where does that bring us for Yuri and his character? Well, I actually think there are 2 different complexes we have to look at because of Yuri's situation with his sister, the Oedipus complex and the sister complex. So the Oedipus complex hardly needs an introduction, and was introduced by Sigmund Freud by term in A Special Type of Choice of Object Made by Men in 1910. Essentially, a young man as he matures discovers a desire for a sexual relationship with his mother and confoundedly has a hostility towards his father who is seen as competition. But then that gets compounded when we add on top of that another type of complex introduced by Japanese psychoanalyst Yoshihide Kubo, who believed that the brother-sister complex was an extension of the Oedipus complex. There are numerous Japanese papers that unfortunately I cannot translate, so I'm just gonna have to believe the translated sources from these authors, but according to even more Japan-based research on the topic, the sister complex is captured in the scheme of a brother who has love feelings for sisters and exclusive desire to own. For men in the sister complex, older sisters and younger sisters can become idealized images combined with sexual aspirations and can have more influence on their lives than their parents. So, for example, choosing a lover or spouse who has something in common or similar to their sister. There's already a lot to unpack here, so let's start breaking this down when it comes to Yuri. When we talk about exclusive desire to own, that definitely fits Yuri to a T, especially based on his reaction to finding out that Yor is already married to someone and his competitive nature with Loid for Yor's affection. Although, it does make me wonder though, because in the beginning of the anime, Yuri is pushy and asks Yor whether or not she's gonna get married, so it's hard to know if he was just extremely calm when there was no threat of competition for his sister before knowing about Loid, or maybe even if it was the abrupt announcement and strange circumstances of finding out that was just completely blindsiding Yuri and gave him this reaction. Because remember, technically speaking, Yuri's in the right because this marriage is technically a sham and they're only doing it for mutual benefit. So Yuri's not in the wrong for assuming that there's something sus about this marriage. His aggression does calm down, especially after the first night of meeting Loid, but I'm still leaning towards the idea that Yuri just suddenly had competition, and his reaction is his complex inducing him to be more competitive with Loid and to test him. And then when we talk about this next sentence about how the sister can have more influence on the person than the parents, well, dead parents plus sister who acts like a parent equals a recipe for absolute disaster when it comes to Yuri's psychological development. We can see aspects of the Oedipus complex as well, since with Loid being the quote-unquote father that Yuri now needs to fight his affection for, we are seeing this internalized struggle come in full stride for Yuri whenever he antagonizes Loid in any aspect or just simply cannot accept that Loid is good enough for Yor. However, before I go any further, I know some of you just might be thinking to yourself, bro, it's not that deep, it's a comedy about a spy and an assassin living together. However, I want to discuss the author of Spy Family a little bit as well, Tatsuya Endo. See, before writing Spy Family, Endo actually wrote very mature content, having written other different manga that involved aspects like serial killers and witch hunting. According to this feature from Tatsuya Endo's editor, Endo likes to think about heavy details on the plot and will be quick to point out contradictions in the story, for example. He also has a desire and need to create deep and well thought out characters, which in turn has pushed him into telling stories that show either a positive or negative shift in the psychological state of his characters, and he'll often read a lot of books to research and improve upon his work. I don't know about you guys, but even for myself when I was doing research for this video, I don't think I gave Endo enough credit for the work and effort he has been putting into these characters and their complexity. I initially just wrote off Yuri as being a comedic relief in this situation, but I think Yuri as a character is fascinating to see their psychological state and decisions be almost predetermined by his traumatic and difficult past. And so here's the real kicker. According to both Jung and Freud, there's a huge emphasis that these complexes are eventually resolved. Freud specifically states that relating an identification with a same-sex parent is ideal for the resolution of the Oedipus complex. So what this is telling me is that there will have to be some sort of plot element or device, probably near the end of the manga, where Yuri will have to work together with Twilight, or perhaps even Yuri will just relate to the idea of protecting the country and safety for the sake of the people they love, which is something very similar to what Twilight does, just the opposite side of the coin. It might be a case of we're not so different after all, which will bring these two characters together, and the conclusion can lead to the happiness of the family. Just based on what these psychological tendencies point to, it seems like that could be an extremely strong possibility. And if that's not enough, there's even a new character that gets introduced in one of the more recent chapters of Spy Family, basically calling out all of Yuri's weird behavior. So it's clear that, like we said before, Endo has very clear intentions and plans for each of these characters and their psychological development. In fact, I would argue that there's no one that understands how out of pocket Yuri acts all of the time better than Tatsuya Endo himself. So, in conclusion, does Yuri have an ancestral desire for Yor? Call me crazy, but I'm actually gonna go with no. I think he's got some crazy parental issues and there's definitely a sister complex going on, but I'm hesitant to actually declare that he's in love with Yor because I think he just has a lot of issues that he's resolving, if I'm being honest. Like I said earlier, I think if he finds reconciliation with Loid, that'll be a huge step in the right direction. I think his attitude towards Yor can be stemmed back from the first conversation we see them have on the phone, where Yuri insists that he wants to make sure that his sister gets married to someone good. It's just that it will take a lot to find someone good in Yuri's eyes in order for a relationship like that to really come to fruition and have Yuri's blessing. This poor kid's just got a lot of issues, so getting that blessing will definitely take a lot of time, but if anyone can do it, I'm sure Twilight can.